been on at TK internationally. So with that, I'm going to start a well, I'm going to share my screen first, right? And then start the slideshow. I have a few pictures to show you along the way, which is mostly the fun part. Okay, how did I switch this? Well, technical difficulty. This worked the other day. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, so first I'll tell you a little bit more about me. I grew up in a small town in East Central Kansas, Burlington, about 2,500 people. Those of you that might be familiar with it, it's home of the Wolf Creek Nuclear Generating Station, its only claim to fame. And so the family business was construction, primarily residential. And frankly, I was looking to not jump into a 6-day-a-week physical labor kind of a job right out of high school. And I looked for ways to garner some education and give myself some time before I got into that. And I came across the architecture program at the University of Kansas and decided to do that. And my father was generous enough to say, well, if that's what you want to do, then you go do that. You have no business building houses if that's the kind of education you want to have. And so I'm still thankful to him for allowing me to do that. And I've been with TK, as you said, from 1983, which is when I graduated from KU, and started actually working for a individual, Ted Knapp, that's the TK initials, who had started his own firm a couple of years before that. And our journey into international was not exactly planned, and it kind of an interesting story, I think. So very early on, we did work with AMC, which is the largest cinema company in the world. It was then, is now. They were exactly 3 blocks down the street, and it was a very convenient working relationship. And that established us with some expertise in the cinema space. And so along the way, in the late 80s, he began marketing to other cinema groups and getting other clients and establishing a reputation within that industry. Part of building that reputation was participation in other events like trade shows and conventions that are built around cinema. At the time, the largest one was called Show West. Now it's currently known as CinemaCon. It's kind of like the Comic Con of cinema is how they couch it. And so, and that show draws people from all around the world. It's the largest show dedicated to cinema in the world. Also, we began authoring articles in trade publications that are read by cinema owners and, the target customers we're after. We started participating in a technical society. At the time, it was called Theater Equipment Association, and it's now called the International Cinema Technology Association. And so, began participating in the way of panel discussions, preparing presentations on particular topics. And so all of those led us to meet some people in the international, from the cinema business internationally. And so the first opportunity we received was actually in Poland. And this was in the early 1990s. It's when I got my passport. I'd never had a passport before that. And so we helped them with a few projects there and decided, well, this could be an interesting way to build on the expertise we have and expand our business. So why don't we see what's out in the international marketplace? And so there are also these kinds of conventions and trade shows internationally, Cine Europe, Cine Asia. And so we began attending those and got a chance to, get some stamps on my passport along the way and meet some people and get some kind of consulting help in designing cinemas. And also, I suppose the first trip that I did, the first stamp on my passport was actually Venezuela. And it's very much showing the kind of business that at the time we discovered cinema to be, which was, it was a bunch of small family businesses. And so one of our customers, who is a cinema operator in Puerto Rico, still a customer today, introduced us to some friends of theirs who were cinema owners in Venezuela. And the interesting thing about it is both of those families are from Cuba. And they were both there when the revolution happened and decided that, oh, we need to get out of here before things get crazy. And so the Carradine family, our customers, went to Puerto Rico, and this other family went to Venezuela, and they remained friends. And this was when Venezuela was a democratic state, and it was welcoming to outsiders and everything. So that's kind of how we started the path into international. It really kind of took off for us in the mid 1990s. For those of you that are cinema lovers, you will remember when you went to your first stadium seating theater. And that's actually a concept that was originated in Europe, in Brussels, Belgium, the first megaplex stadium seating complex. And so that was the genesis of the reinvention of cinema that happened all around the globe. And so we got very engaged in the international market there. Again, we were still working with AMC, our largest customer. They asked us to help them in Europe with their European expansion. And so we established an office in London, which we had for quite a while, and had some, modest success designing cinemas around the world from that office. Until about 2001. 2001 was a bad year for cinema. All of the expansion that had happened led to some financial difficulty for some of our customers. And so it was a challenging time. And then the events of September 11th happened, which I guess this year is the 20th anniversary of that horrific event, and put us in a position where we had to close that office and kind of hunker down and try to get through as a company, much like what we've been through in the COVID pandemic the last year. And so the second part two of our journey to international practice began with ownership transition. And so the founder, Ted Knapp, he had always wanted to sell the firm and have it continue beyond his active involvement. And three partners, including me, Jack, and Tamara, we bought the majority of the company from them in 2007. Interesting timing, right? Because we know what happened in 2008, the Great Recession. So either Ted is really smart and we're really stupid, or it was just a freak occurrence. But that really started us on a second journey into the international practice of architecture. And so we kind of began to recover from the recession. And in 2010, we decided, we need to decide what we as the new owners want to do with this company. And so we developed a strategic plan and decided that we wanted to brand ourselves as entertainment architecture, a little bit broader than just cinema. And then we wanted to grow our cinema expertise internationally. And so, excuse me, after spending about a year showing up our business, we ventured out into the international marketplace. And we selected two targets. Russia and China, for very, very different reasons and with varying levels of success, obviously. And so our journey to international started. We attended the Cine Asia show, which had moved to Hong Kong by this time, in 2011. And then in 2012, we started our real journey into international. So our first trip was to Guangzhou, China, to attend a cinema trade show. And that's the three of us. On the outside are Jack and Tamara, my partners, and our wonderful interpreter Marina is there in the middle. And this was our first time to China. We had no idea what to expect, and it was quite eye-opening to all of us. Interestingly, along the way, we kind of grabbed the show coordinator, thinking she was our translator. And we're wondering why she was running off all the time and doing other things, and why she wasn't there helping us. And then later in the day, Marina got a hold of us and said, "Hey, I'm here. Where do you want to meet?" And we're like, "Oh, who is this poor woman we've been dragging around all day and angry and upset with?" Well, it was the show organizer, Natalie. And so things happened. But interestingly, we spent a lot of 2012 trying to check the marketplace in China, which was my responsibility, and decide partners. So we returned in June, and with the help of U.S. Commercial Services and their Gold Key services, we arranged several meetings and to meet different exhibition companies and people in cinema business in China. And this is one of these meetings. This was in Shanghai with the Shanghai Municipal Housing Design Institute, which are state-owned architectural and engineering companies. They're located all over the country, and they end up doing the majority of the final architectural work in China. So it's a very interesting process. The person in the middle here, Mr. Liu, has become a friend, even though we do not speak the same language. Remain in contact to him this day, and he becomes kind of a spearhead for one of my favorite stories that I will tell a little bit later. For those of you that are familiar with the calendar, the holiday calendar in China, June is a holiday. There's a week-long holiday in June. We had no idea. So we went to this design institute, and these were the people that were in the office. Everybody else was on holiday, but they met with us during that time frame. We also had meetings with a large dealer or a large equipment company, Sino-Cinetech in Shanghai, and this was the lovely tea service that they treated us to during our meeting. And this group actually became partners to us later on. And so it's interesting how we found them so early on. So I'm going to pop back for a second and show you is the slideshow working okay? You're seeing me move through the slides? Okay, good. So as I say, at this first show in Guangzhou, I learned quite a bit about Chinese mentality and the vitality of that country and its economy. There was a booth across from us that was the Sabin company, Guangzhou Sabin. And the afternoon of the first day of the show, they came over to us and said, "We would like to take you to dinner." And we didn't really understand that was a very important part of making business in China, is the sharing of food or the dinner things. And we're like, while we were here, it's our first time in China, we were really wanting to see cinemas. And so that's what we had planned to do tonight. And so, okay. And then like 15 minutes later, they come back over and goes, "Okay, so we would like to take you on a tour of cinemas and then go to dinner." Oh, okay. And so it took them no time to figure out how to react to disappointing news and turn it into something very interesting. And so over the next several years, I had a variety of interactions with them. The person here in the middle next to me is Bill. As you know, they all have an English name as well as a Chinese name that they get to pick. And this was on top of the Canton Tower, the Guangzhou Tower in China, which is a very iconic place. So all of this exploration in China led us to establishing a joint venture company and a joint venture office in Beijing. And here's pictures of from December of 2012, the office space. Our partner Tom, who's part of the Sino-Cinetech group that treated us to tea, and Miss Jo and Tian Yu, who were from the Beijing Cinema Design Institute. And so that became our process in China and our partners there. Along the way, I participated in a whole bunch of Chinese exhibitions. The most famous one is the BIRTV. And so BIRTV, this is the building that the cinema show is in. It's like an 8-building complex, International Exhibition Center. It's huge, and there's thousands of people there. It's a crazy event, like a lot of things in that country. And then, you know, at the trade show booth, very much the part of what you see almost anywhere, and pretty typical. These are a couple of the young ladies who worked in our office there in Beijing, Xian and Linlin. And you know, the things that these people did for me along the way, my flight would get in at midnight, and they'd meet me at the airport and make sure I got checked into the hotel okay. And I'd leave the hotel at 4 o'clock in the morning to return back, and they'd meet me and get me transportation, and just amazing what they would do to help me along the way. Also got a chance to begin to explore the market in the Middle East. This is the first trade show in the Middle East, and it was in Abu Dhabi in 2014 again. I remember it very distinctly because the Royals happened to be playing in the World Series, and I was trying to find out what in the heck they were doing during that while that process was going on. But it was rather a bit eye-opening. Along the way, we used the Missouri Department of Economic Development's help a lot. They were tremendously helpful to us in doing research on different international markets and helping arrange meetings as we'd go around to different countries. And somehow they nominated us to be the Exporter of the Year, which we were named in 2015, which seems really crazy strange for a small professional services company, as opposed to all the large, you know, big, huge mega companies in Missouri that export all over the world. I throw this one in because, you know, we still continued with our programs in domestic. Hi, Irina, I see you smiling at this. This was our 35th anniversary celebration at CinemaCon. And so we rented the room. Those of you, you'll either recognize it from the Hangover movie, as it was the suite that was in that movie, or from the Rain Man movie with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman, the same room. So we had that room for our 35th anniversary party. Quite a bit of fun. I use this slide because, I mean, as we were trying to build our business there in China, they arranged to have me interviewed by a magazine and took some really nice, wonderful photos of it. And I have a copy of the magazine, of course, all in Chinese with the interview, but very, very interesting process. Also, as we did this, you know, we worked together with the group in our Chinese office, and we'd get a couple of them to come over yearly and spend 3 or 4 weeks and you know, kind of do some training and some cultural interaction. And they these two happened to be here for CinemaCon, so we got them to attend that as well and participate in the party. Probably my most interesting, all of them have some interest, but international trip was my trip around the world in May of 2017. And so I left and I went to the Beijing office and I spent 3 or 4 days there. And then I departed from there and went to Saudi Arabia through Dubai, obviously. And so the show in Saudi Arabia, my first time in Saudi Arabia, was a ICSC, an International Shopping Center Council show. And so it's a huge real estate development conference. And the last night of this, we were invited to do a tour. And so this was a World Heritage Site, and it's like a 600-year-old mosque in the center of Old Jeddah that is built on top of the foundations of a 1,000-year-old mosque. So for those of us from the US, that's pretty amazing that there's that kind of history along the way. This is also from 2017, and it's a Cine Europe show in Barcelona. Thought it was interesting. This is the theme of this particular event was promoting The Greatest Showman, for those of you that are familiar with that movie. And so the costume people are from the promotion for The Greatest Showman, and the 3 others in the individual are all cinema exhibition companies. Miriam on the left is now from Pakistan, working there, and me and Irving are both from Malaysia. As I said, dining is a very important part of doing business in Asia. And so this is a dinner with our partners and friends in Hong Kong. It's Ruth's Chris. That's where they wanted to go. We're in Hong Kong, and they wanted to go to the steakhouse, but that is what we did. And then this one is a meeting with a potential with a customer in Nanjing, Suning company, very large development company. So a lot of interesting things along the way. So this map represents the countries in yellow that we have designed cinemas in. And you can see it's quite a broad reach. The latest 2 additions to the map are the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Australia. Interestingly enough, we've been pursuing Australia for quite a while, but so quite a nice footprint. Quite a nice footprint. I haven't been to all of these countries, by the way. So before I talk a little bit more about the profession of architecture, I want to tell a little bit about some of the things that I've learned from practicing architecture internationally and from engaging in the international marketplace. And it is the similarities. Everything seems so divided right now, divided culturally, divided socioeconomically in a lot of ways. But if you get past the talking heads and the clutter and all of the shouting and yelling, the people at their core have so many things in common. If everybody would get out of the way, the people, for the most part, would get along fine, and we'd have a lot less problems. Most people are focused on creating a better life for their families, whatever they think that means and however they want to go about doing it. And so I've met some remarkable people and made some amazing friends that, that's entirely what their lives are about, is to create a better opportunity for them and their family. And that's been the American process for decades. And so I think we need to keep that in mind, and we need to try to recognize that there's a lot more that ties us together than pulls us apart. The other thing that I've learned that is very interesting to my profession is the power of visual. When we started on the journey, we had translation services constantly because we felt like we needed that. And I was pretty amazed that in most places around the world that you're able to navigate and get somewhere without necessarily having the language. I don't even know how many times I've been to China, 30 maybe. And I think there was one time in a taxi cab where I had trouble with getting directions to a person. And that's just remarkable to me that, but the other is the power of the visual as a language, and that the ability to communicate in graphic form translates all languages. And so, I mean, I remember talking to an architect one time, and we did not speak the same language, but we were drawing things back and forth to each other. And you know, we were able to communicate just through that visual um, media. And so, and you know, that is how architects are taught to think, is visually and graphically. And so that translates, and that can be understood by everyone. And that's part of what makes it so interesting. So it looks like I'm doing okay on time, so I will tell a couple of stories, not like I haven't just been telling you one giant story all along the way. But our first trip to Guangzhou in 2012 really, really interesting. I talked to you about Mr. Liu earlier from the Shanghai Municipal Housing Design Institute. He arranged a meeting and introduced us to a large cinema equipment supplier. And their chairman had decided that they wanted to grow and expand and actually own cinemas, as opposed to just selling the equipment. And so I met with a woman, and her name was JoJo, at least that's what I understood it to be. And so JoJo said, I just had to come see this location. I just had to come see this location. And so this was actually, I'm sorry, this is from Asia, because it was my first time to go to Guangzhou. And so she goes, let's just meet at the train station, and I'll buy you a ticket and we'll go to Guangzhou together. I'm like, okay, so in Hong Kong, you want me to find my way to the train station and find you in this huge bustling center, and we're going to go on a train ride together. And we did. We went on a train ride, and we went to Guangzhou. We saw this crazy, stupid idea to build a cinema on top of an existing parking garage. And when we came back, we did a design for it, and the local authorities would never approve it because of the life safety of the issue. But it was a crazy idea. But then again, the whole thing had to culminate with having dinner, right? And so they had bought me a return ticket by myself to go back to Hong Kong on the last train to Hong Kong. And so we went to the dinner, and it's this very little private room. And, you know, the food is all served family style, and you're all eating together. And then there's this toasting ritual. And the toasting ritual is essentially doing shots and you know, forming a relationship and kind of figuring out that you're comfortable working with each other. And so he goes, what would you like? And having been totally unprepared and not knowing that maybe I could get away with saying red wine or something, I just said, whatever you want to do, except don't do sake. So of course he heard sake. And so this is what we're toasting with, is these little shot glasses of sake. And it's going around, and I got called out very early on for not emptying my little shot glass each time we did a toast. And so I had to do that. And so this JoJo had to leave before the dinner because she had to arrange this event that was going to happen in Macau at the conclusion of the Asia show. And so she arranged for her niece to be there and be my translator. And that worked fine. She's a great, very interesting young woman. And about an hour into the dinner, she looks over to me and she goes, have you ever drank this much before? And I'm like, well, yes, but it was a long time ago, long time ago. So anyway, they get me to the train station, and I get on the train, and I'm on the train back to Hong Kong, which is about an hour, not a long thing, but I'm deathly afraid that I'm going to just fall asleep, and that I'm going to be like on this continuous loop of a train running from Hong Kong to Guangzhou. And so I'm texting with Jack and Tamara. I'm trying to keep my brain occupied and stay awake on the trip back. So that is quite a story. The other one is when we got to Guangzhou, we had not eaten. And so she said, well, why don't we eat here in the train station? There's a KFC. You like KFC? Yeah, I like KFC. And so we went to the KFC and looked, and I barely recognized anything that was on the menu. I mean, I could see chicken, but it didn't look like the chicken I was used to having. And none of the sides were anything like they serve here in the US. It was just completely different. And so I thought, how genius is that because they're very popular, how they've adapted their business to that particular culture and the likes of the customers there. And so that was a very interesting process. The other one of my favorite trips was the around the world trip that included Saudi Arabia. And so, as I said, I went from Kansas City, I went to Beijing, and then I went from Beijing to Jeddah, and then I came from Jeddah through Amsterdam back home. And so I literally did go all the way around the world, and it was a 10-day trip in total, hence the title. But we did this national heritage tour, and they'd taken us to several sites along the way, making our way to this mosque, which was kind of the end of it. And we had a tour guide and an assistant. And as we're starting to come back, the young man who was the assistant tour guide asked me, is this your first time in the kingdom? I'm like, well, yeah. And he goes, was it what you expected? And I paused for a second and go, well, yes and no. What do you mean? Well, I mean, I think, the climate for sure, and the architecture is kind of what I expected, but the people, not so much. He goes, oh, what do you mean? I go, well, everybody seems pretty happy. They're smiling most of the time. And they've actually been pretty friendly and welcoming. And he goes, yeah, they don't show us the real stories on our television either. And so I think that's true, as he was very interested in the perception and how it compared. So I also want to talk a minute about a parallel journey that I've been on since 2017, which is I've been on an advisory board at the School of Architecture and Design at the University of Kansas. And so it's a great opportunity to get re-engaged with the roots of the architectural profession. But it kind of talks about the profession from the other side, is how do we prepare students to be able to practice now and in the future, and how do we attract students, and how do we attract students of diversity, which, when I was in the school, there may have been, out of a class of 144, that there may have been 10 women, and there may have been 3 or 4 people of color. And now you go in, and it's about half and half, men and women. So they've managed to bridge that gap, but there's still a big difference profession-wide with diversity. And if I've learned anything from this international journey, is that you're better when you have a broader perspective, and you're better when you have a broader point of view, and you get better solutions, you get better answers. And it's just plain rewarding to be exposed to people from different backgrounds than yourself. And so I think that, the school is still struggling with how to attract the right kinds of people to the program. And they're also struggling with, what education is going to be like post-pandemic. Natalie and I were talking earlier about this program and how it's just happened in the last year, since the live events kind of had to be pushed to the side for the moment. And so, perhaps there's an interesting hybrid model of education that makes education a little bit more approachable for some people. And so just think it's really interesting to think about that side journey. Along the way here, we have hired several people from an international background. And it was really game changing for us in international practice to have not just the language skills, but also to have the cultural understanding, to understand the cultural sensibility of certain things, or sensitivity of certain things in certain cultures. I mean, some were obvious. The Middle East and alcohol don't go well together. So that on its surface is pretty understandable. But certain religious overtones don't play well, and certain things that we don't think of as religious can be perceived as religious by people from some certain backgrounds and certain cultures. And so, I mean, I have enjoyed the heck out of the time I spent with these young people from different parts of the world, and finding out what's different and what's the same, about our profession and how it's taught, and how people become accredited along that way. So I thought I should talk a little bit about, if you're actually interested in a career in architecture and design, or even a career. I'll start with a career in international business or in the international marketplace in some way. And so the first thing I would say is that the language skills just can't be overestimated. I'm in awe of people that are bilingual or trilingual or communicate effectively in multiple languages, Irina. My brain doesn't work that way, and I absorb words, but I still couldn't carry on a conversation in another language and wouldn't even try. And I noticed it with my partners, Tom and Mimi specifically, they're both very, very fluent in English. They attended university in the UK, and that was a big part of that, but it was always part of their educational background. But it's very obvious to me that Tom still thinks in Chinese, and then he does the translation, and then he communicates it, what he's thinking in English. But his wife, Mimi, I mean, it's so instantaneous that she's obviously also thinking in English. When she's in a situation where she's speaking in English, she can immediately process the information and interact. And I've seen the same thing from one of our international people here, Joy, that she actually attended a little bit of high school in the US. And so her English and skills and cultural understanding is so much more advanced than a student who came from just to the university in the US. And so just the processing. So anything you can do to position yourself with language skills in the international marketplace is a big, big positive. Expose yourself to as broad as possible of people from different places, different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, from different experiences. That was something that I regret not doing in my youth, because I didn't think it had anything to do with my life. How wrong I turned out to be. I'd see the article in the newspaper and say, that doesn't have anything to do with me, I'll just skip it. And I wish I had been more engaged earlier. And so, broader exposure leads you to broader knowledge, better perspective, and will help you in any kind of a career that you could choose. Educational background. I looked at the School of Architecture and Design and what they claim you need for educational background, and they talked about math and science, and they do talk about language, which I think is interesting, since they don't have a language requirement for you to graduate. And perhaps that's why. But I know a lot of people in the profession that got interested in architecture more from an art background, as opposed to a construction or a technical or a building things, putting things together kind of background. So it doesn't preclude you, but some mathematical basic kind of understanding. You have to be comfortable with it. And then, of course, any kind of art kind of appreciation, art history, all that is somewhat part of the curriculum, but any background that you will have will be helpful to you along that journey. I've talked about some of these, but talk about the guidance that I received along the way and the value of mentors. We had a really remarkable mentor here at TK. I mean, obviously, I learned a lot about the practice of architecture from our founder, Ted Knapp. And so that goes without saying. When we were expanding in the 1990s and we were trying to figure out this international thing, he engaged a friend of his, Don Schulte. And Don had a long international career for Knight Ridder and had the perspective of business issues. He had the perspective of cultural issues. He had the perspective of travel. He understood management. And so he was a huge help to me along my career, taking a step from a person who's doing projects to a person who's trying to be part of running an organization or a company. And it was invaluable along the way. Organizations, I mean, as I said, people are amazed that our governments actually do things to help us along the way. And we've taken a lot of advantage of those things. You know, the U.S. Commercial Services, as part of the Chamber of Commerce, did a tremendous job for us in trying to grow internationally and consider markets. And the Missouri Department of Economic Development, along the way, ended up doing most of the heavy lifting. We started with the national one, the U.S. Commercial Services, and then we found out that pretty much 90% of what we needed was available from the Missouri Department, and so we leaned on all of them very, very heavily. The other thing that I will mention as preparation, as guidance, is networking. Again, the more people that you interact with from diverse backgrounds, the better you are. And opportunities come from unexpected places. And so the more you put yourself out there, and the more you get engaged in the community, and the more you get engaged in the world, things will appear. It's just, I'm a big believer in karma. And so to me, it's just part of karma. It's like, if you put yourself out there, eventually things will come back and things will help you along the way. It's a big part of actually the marketing part of a business is networking. People that you don't think have any way to interact with you or to engage you on a business issue. I learned that lesson, 10 years later, they show up in someplace else and they're in a position to become your best client. And so everybody's worth your time, and everybody's worth listening to and learning from. So the first three, some resources. The first three to learn about the profession of architecture. The first two are national organizations: AIA, the American Institute of Architects. There are about 100,000, maybe 105,000 licensed architects in the US. And you think about in a population of 330 million, that's not a whole bunch of people. And so this is the organization that works on our behalf and kind of also works to keep us straight with ethics rules and provide us resources to practice and resources to manage our companies and resources to have lifelong learning. And the second organization is NCRB, which is the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. So like most things in the US, architectural practice is legislated at the state level, licensed at the state level. Unlike other countries like China, where you could get a national license that's not possible to do in the US. It's state by state. And so when you did the introduction, you said you're licensed in 30 states. Well, that's because you have to be licensed in any one you do a project in. And so this is the organization that all of the state organizations report to, and they try to build similarities and consensus to make it not so cumbersome for a architect in Missouri to get a license in Alaska. It's a little cumbersome, but it's a lot better than it would have been if it were not for NCARB. So NCRB is also the program that people, once they have graduated or in the educational program, they have what used to be called an intern developmentship program. It's now called AXP, but it's a process that documents the experience that you need to be able to, upon testing completion, be able to be a licensed or registered architect. And so they have a ton of resources along the way to help people prepare and study for that, and to show them the kinds of experience that they need to get in their education. And then lastly, I'll give a plug for my alma mater. This is the School of Architecture and Design, and their website. It has information about admissions, has information about the faculty. You'll see the advisory board on there if you dig deep enough, and talk about the different programs, because there are design programs that are not on the architecture path, but they are related, whether they be industrial design or graphic design, and they have a lot of similarities to impact. And then the last two are for those who are thinking about getting in the international marketplace, and the ones that we used, the Missouri Department of Economic Development, the Export Missouri, and the U.S. Commercial Services that we used. So very rewarding career, architecture and international practice. Either one by itself is rewarding. Together have some pretty amazing journeys. I meant to have my passport out so you could see how thick it is. You know, I had the extra pages put into it when they would still allow you to do that. And I probably had 6 Chinese visas in there, because I had to get one every year until they finally started giving 10-year visas, which last longer than my passport is good for. So here's my information, our website, if you want to take a look at some of the cool things we do. And thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, this has been so fascinating, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing about your career and the different places you've been in China and in the Middle East and even in Europe. It really was so interesting for me. I hope our audience found it valuable. I have a few questions that I just want to kind of briefly ask you, just to kind of review and bring it back to people's attention. You mentioned earlier, how you got into architecture, kind of coming from the construction side and things like that. But for a young person or a young professional looking at programs, what would you say, now that you're on the advisory board for KU, what should they look for in a architecture program in school, right? What makes a good program?
Yeah. So, the first thing is to pick up an accredited program. So that will put you on a path to licensure. And it's the NAAB, and I think that's National Association of Architectural Boards. And so they have a program that the kind of classes and the kinds of educational experiences that need to be in an architecture program to allow you to be on a track to licensure. So that's the first and the key most thing. So much of there's a lot of great architectural schools in the Midwest and around the US. And part of why, architecture and engineering is such a great industry in Kansas City is because of the great universities that are close and around and provide the talent to those companies. One thing that I will tell you that's different about KU and a couple of other schools of architecture is they have a real focus on construction and design, build. And so there's hand-on experience of building a building available in the Studio 804 program at KU and 3 other programs that have design build opportunities. And the architectural school at Auburn has a very, very strong, similar kind of a program that gets the same kind of press. And there are a few others, but so many of the top rated schools are very theoretical and very intellectual in their approach to architectural practice. And that's wonderful. I'm in awe of some of those people and what they can do. But I live in the real world with real clients who have real things they want us to solve. And those are, to me, those are best served by people that have a practical understanding of buildings and construction and how they go together.
Yeah.
Long answer, I know.
No, not at all. I think it's valuable information. I love that you talked about mentorship and the resources and the value of that in your career, even later in your career, right? When you were making the push into international stuff. And that's something that I have heard from all of our international career series speakers is pretty much finding a mentor or finding those individuals to emulate and to hear from and hopefully either shadow in a formal or informal capacity. I think I'm glad you mentioned that, and I encourage our audience to take that to heart for sure. Um, Something I didn't know, obviously was about, and we're getting close to the end of our time too, so I'm mindful of that. But I didn't realize myself how international architecture could be, and the different ways you can do it just about anywhere. And I think that's really really cool. And you shared obviously about some of your experiences, but I wanted to give you the floor, Mike. Maybe one moment or one anecdote, one story you might have that you love to share with people about your work that you've done internationally. If you have one particular story that you'd like to kind of end on before I close. I know you
I
shared some fascinating ones already, but I'm sure you have so many
do.
more.
So this first slide, um, this is a theater in Hangzhou, China. I don't know. I had not heard of Hangzhou before I went there. It's a little city of about 10 million people, about an hour outside of Shanghai. And so we did this theater design for Shanghai Film Group. And Shanghai Film Group is one of those state-owned exhibition companies that's kind of like the Hollywood studios were before the Paramount consent decree. When they made the movies, they had the stars under contract. They owned the movie theaters that the movies were shown in. And, they kind of controlled the whole process from start to finish. And so you almost have to be hired by one of these state-owned companies first in that kind of a marketplace. But we did it, and we did a second project for them, and it was in Zhuhai, China, about an hour outside of Hong Kong, boat ride out of Hong Kong. And I was there presenting the design for that project in December 2016. So just after a presidential election, where a very recognizable person was elected president, and they were fascinated by the process. They don't get to pick their leaders. They don't understand. They don't relate to the process of election, and they were totally fascinated. So they're like, so Trump going to be president? Like that is how our process worked. The people spoke, more people voted for him, he will be the president. And it was a very interesting topic over lunch, which again, the meal part of doing business in China. But very proud of this theater. It was a joint effort with our partners at Beijing, and kind of really was when I began to understand the culture and the importance of design and the importance of telling a story with the design. And so, I wish I had more pictures of this queued up to show you, that I could show you. This theme was symphony. This was a theater that was about the art of music.
That's fascinating. Well, I know it's been so good for me to hear about this, and we've got a couple comments in the chat from people who've really enjoyed it. And so thank you, Mike, once again for being here and donating your time and providing so much interesting information about your career. I'd also like to thank all of our audience members today, both on the Zoom and on Facebook, for joining us and listening to Mike's story. I would like to close by putting in a plug for some of our upcoming programs at the IRC. In particular, we do have on next Tuesday, we'll be launching our Great Decisions lecture series with a lecture on Persian Gulf security issues. Thursday, we have a news and views conversation group about Brexit and the EU. And of course, Friday, we have another international career series, this time on working in international art. So if any of you are going to approach the architecture field from the art angle, you might be interested in that as well. Thank you again, Mike, for joining us. You can find, to our audience, you can find all of the information about this program and all our upcoming programs on our website, including a recording of this program, which will be available for you to review and get those resources and anything else you need. Thank you so much, Mike, for being here. Thank you to our audience. I'll let everyone go on their Friday, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Arena.